This is going to be your master guide on building your OSRS account from scratch. This will not only help newcomers, but also those who already have established accounts and want pointers on where to take their adventures next in order to progress the game. Whether you want to raid or max your account and AFK at the GE and max gear, this guide should help you achieve and educate you on the many paths of building an account on OSRS and progressing into PVM. Now, this guide is mostly going to be for mains. I don't play Iron Man. I did on RS3, but I don't know most beginner methods on starting Iron Man game mode accounts. Sorry if that's you. There will still be useful information here for you when it comes to raiding and whatnot, but probably best to look up someone who mains Iron for that. Starting off an account is the most overwhelming thing. There's about 100 things you need to do or are tempted to look at and get distracted by. My point of view is from someone who enjoys endgame content and raiding, so that's how I am going to lead you through this. I can't tell you what is going to be the most fun, only what is the fastest way to the end game. Before we take a deep dive into our ultimate account building guide and talk about questing, I want to talk about the sponsor of the video, HelloFresh. We've all heard of HelloFresh before, and as you all know, I work crazy hours. Sometimes streams go very late into the night. Sometimes I'm up too early in the morning and I can't go to a grocery store to pick things up or go out to eat conveniently. With a chaotic schedule, sometimes I just don't have the energy to plan out meals for the week. HelloFresh lets us schedule meals easily with fast and fresh ingredients, all bundled up and no hassle with forgetting ingredients. On nights that Hedron has editing to do, I can use HelloFresh to jump in and follow easy-to-read instructions and create a healthy and delicious meal at home without burning down the house. I don't have to stare at the fridge and try to pretend I know how to cook because there's over 50 recipes to choose from that even picky eaters can enjoy. With summer in full heat, there are lots of options to whip out your grill for a delicious barbecue. So if you're a busy nerd like me or just want to spice up the week, then this is a great deal for you. Click the link in the description or use my code POGHF141001 and get 10 free meals and free appetizers for life. One appetizer item per box while subscription is active if you're in the US. Outside the US, the local discount will apply. Now let us get back to our next account building task, questing and diaries. I highly recommend doing every single quest as quickly as possible and training along the way to achieve said quest requirements. More recent quests also help you learn PVM mechanics like Desert Treasure 2 and hold your hand into coming into raiding, etc. Diaries are another thing players should look at completing. The most important ones to note are Western Provinces Hard, Sears Hard, and Lumbridge Elite. Ideally, you complete all of these as your account progresses, but I understand that 75% of these are major chores and boring as hell. The ones mentioned get you Elite Void for raiding, Ruby Bolt proc chance increase, and easy teleports with extra Slayer block slot for faster grinding. The wiki has a guide on efficient questing, and there is Quest Helper plugin, which basically takes all the chore work out of questing if you're someone who despises quests. In this footage, you can see Hedron, who is notoriously known for never doing her quests and diaries. She has to run from barrows to get her salves imbued because of teleporting there with ease, and she pays the boatman to do hard mode Tob because she didn't do her night at the theater quests. If you see Hedron, shame.
Shame!
She also uses a seed pod to teleport to the GE instead of diary perks. Don't be Hedron. If you are someone who has never played OSRS, then my advice is to max out your combat stats as quickly as possible through questing or Nightmare Zone. People often ask me, can I do X with Y stats? But the answer is always just get 99. Stats are too good for your damage to be leaving below max. There are other methods to train things faster, like Wildy Slayer and different methods for Iron Man specifically, but I would rather just AFK a couple weeks with Nightmare Zone and get it over with. I find Slayer incredibly tedious and inefficient, but I understand Iron Man needs supplies from Slayer monsters. Nightmare Zone is AFK, and the bosses you kill have XP multipliers, making it the best option always. For non-melee stats, completing Monkey Madness 2 and Chinning/Barraging are going to give you the fastest results. Each stat increase is equal to about 2% DPS. Going from the worst gear to the best gear often is less beneficial than gaining your last 10 levels in a stat. It is the freest way to progress your account and increase the range of things you are able to do. Don't try cutting cheese with a butter knife. Those who have multiple accounts or are familiar with the game in general could start raiding once their stats are 85 plus. In my opinion, you're shooting yourself in the foot by not grinding for max stats before starting any major PVM grinds in raids. Get a free T-Bow's worth of damage by just leveling your stats. Don't make your teammates carry you. This goes into money making. Gaining GP is the next most important thing when building your account, You need money to do everything, of course. Now, people swear by Slayer that it is the best early money making. It is not. Effective Slayer grinding costs money, and by the time you are grinding out Slayer properly, you are just breaking even trying to get the XP and get out. Having max stats helps you grind for money and progress your account much faster and spend less on supplies. You want the fastest tasks and high XP. You aren't there to get money. You won't be doing boss tasks unless you want to sidetrack and go pet hunting, which is fine, but no, this can be extremely slow and just halts you from progression. If pet hunting is your end goal, I'd highly recommend returning to these bosses later with max gear. In my Discord, there is a spreadsheet of a Slayer block list for maximum XP an hour. There are two options to making very early money. There is herb runs and buying bonds, of course. Now, I don't advocate for buying bonds, but that's your prerogative. I play the game to play the game, not buy my way through it. Herbs make you easily 2 mil an hour, and in a week, you'll have your gear set up to start grinds like Vorkath, Corrupted Gauntlet, Muzpa, or if comfortable, Desert Treasure 2 bosses. These will be your main moneymakers until you hit the 200 mil GP bracket. The next moneymaker and account progression I swear by is gearing up for Nex. Nex has low gear requirements, and in learner teams of 3 to 5 man, you make the best money in the game. You, as a newer player, can make as much money as I do, as someone who has a 25 bill bank. Now, for those of you who aren't new, I can hear you groaning, Nex is so boring, dude. At Nex's highest scaling duo, you can easily make 20 mil an hour and have all the gear you want for every raid in a few months of grinding. Nex also has excellent return in drop rates, 1 out of 43 to see a purple, worth a split of anywhere from 100 to 250 mil. It's tremendously faster than any other method. Faster drop rates means you can progressively buy upgrades as you go, instead of using awful gear until you get a shadow drop, for example. Nex is difficult and complex, with a ton to master. The complex switches you pull off will prepare you for raids like Tob, and is far more challenging than people give it credit for. Once you have everything, you can go do whatever is fun for you, and do it in max stats and max gear from all the money you just made going for it at Nex. Now, I've made several videos on learner setups and max budget setups for those who have established banks. Our Discord has a Nex Finder channel with FAQ, gear setups, and anything else you need to start your Nex grind once you've hit this stage. My duo, Phasphor/Hedron, started with a 700 mil bank with Carol's and ZCB. Now she's in full Torva, Tibo ZCB, literal max Nex gear. It took her about 6 months of a few times a week grinding for an hour or two. Now that she has the money she wants for gear, she does solo cox and other things she actually enjoys, instead of being completely locked in at Nex. Whatever excuse it is that you don't want to go do Nex, then your next best option is Tombs of Masket. Toa is notorious for shitting out purples to the point they have dropped 90% in value, except for the money stick to Meccan Shadow. In the average player's 300 expert Toa, you have a 4.2% chance for a purple and 0.17% chance for that being a shadow. That means you can expect to see a shadow every 565 deathless 300 raids. I know what you're thinking. Holy shit, that's low. Yeah. The higher invos you go, the more chance you get. Masori holds some value still, and Toa is a very entry-level raid to learn. Toa is excellent money, but only once you actually go find that shadow. Until then, the average purple value is next to nothing. Tob and Cox are fun and great raids, but their overall purple chance is less than half of those at Toa, which is why everybody is doing Toa. Tob is a 9% purple chance split amongst your entire team, with the average purple being worth far less than Toa. Now, some people don't like team content or have troubles making friends. Toa is the best solo raid for money. A 500 invo Toa is approximately 20 to 25 mil an hour. Tob and Cox typically cap out around 10 mil an hour. The final best moneymaker on the higher end of skill for those already playing would be Colosseum. Not only will you get your best in slot range cape, you'll make about 12 to 15 mil an hour solid from Splinter/Quiver trade-ins and sprinkle in some 10 mil uniques here and there. I would not suggest this unless you are maxed with the BIS Colosseum setups or just really comfortable with Colosseum. Trying to grind this can chunk your supplies in a 500k death fee every time you fail. This is for people more so returning to the game after a break, or those who've done Inferno and want to make some money, not really so much for new players. Now, there are more obscure and possibly more fun things out there for you to grind if you want, but that's your decision how you want to balance fun and the fastest way to max gear. These are what I suggest to everyone who comes into my chat. I don't advocate for wasting time doing grinds that are less painful and less money overall. Grind the shitty grinds, and then be free and do whatever you want in 1/4 the time. The ridiculous moneymakers in the 20 mil region blow things like Zulrah out of the water, being 10 times higher. Getting into rating overall once you've got a grip on your GP situation is up to you. People ask me what mega rare I would buy first, if they should do rebuilds, etc. Along the way, you're bound to ask about upgrades. When do I upgrade X? What is best for this boss? Do I get X or Y first? I get these questions a lot, and without knowing everyone's interest in the game, skill level, bank value, etc., it's hard to give constant advice on upgrades in depth. I am going to teach you what I know about gear in RuneScape and how to figure this all out yourself. I am going to lay out some generic knowledge I have about gear that tells me what is useful as a gut feeling. A lot of this you might already know, but a lot of it isn't really common knowledge unless you've deep dived the wiki and formulas on things. But first, we need to talk about something. How damage rolls. Now, the majority of you out there don't understand this whatsoever, but it is actually incredibly simple. When I swing my rune scimitar at Scurious the Rat, the game checks several stats to see what happens. First, it checks to see if I even hit Scurious. It first takes my current stats, which is attack for this part. If it's boosted with a potion, my current prayer, and my attack style, which is slash in this case, and rolls for a random number based on those stats. It then takes this number and rolls it against Scurious's defense. His defense levels multiplied by his slash defense. If my number is bigger than his number, bada bing, bada boom, I hit the boss. If not, it's a big fat 0. The next thing it checks is what number I am hitting. This is literally just 1 to the max hit rolled randomly. If my max hit is 3, then it's rolling between 1 and 3. Each additional max hit is an additional pip on your die. This is why things that increase max hit are usually more important than accuracy. A bigger die when you land accuracy matters a lot more than a 1% increased chance to roll said die. Magic and ranged work the same way, and this did get bogged down a little bit by weakness changes, but ignore that for now. Ranged checks the monster's defense level and range defense. But magic checks the monster's mage level and magic defense for blocking attacks. So this is also why you see people barraging in melee gear often. If something has 1 magic, you basically never splash. Combat styles are really important as well. These choose which accuracy of your gear to choose and roll against the opponent. The type of attack also matters as these boost different stats in the background. So if your rune skimmy is on block, it is increasing your defense level by 3 in the background. If it's on slash, it's boosting strength by 3 levels. So you basically always want your weapon on aggressive, as it's an extra +3 strength levels. So magic never has increased max hits from style, so it matters much less. Ranged on rapid is a tick faster for all weapons, which outweighs even potential max hits of accurate every single time. Last thing to keep in mind is that special attacks are always the same style, no matter what. If you put your claws on stab, you will roll that lower stab bonus against the enemy's slash defense, which just makes your accuracy even lower if they're weak to stab. And without further ado, welcome to Common Gear Misconceptions. Starting with the Fang. So this is a good weapon to start with. This is useful almost everywhere and costs 13 mil currently. Everyone has this, and I see so many people misuse it. Fang has a low max hit, but rolls accuracy twice, making it extremely accurate. It is amazing on high defense bosses, weakest to melee, which is most Toa bosses. It is bad on anything under 50 defense, which is basically all Slayer mobs, and it does not benefit as much from strength bonus as most weapons. The Lightbearer doubles your spec regen, but does not have any stats. How does this compare to DPS rings? It is also amazing on high defense bosses, weakest to melee, due to allowing you to use highly accurate special attacks. Next for ZCB or Toa bosses as a good example. Pairs extremely well with a Fang, where strength bonus matters less, and it's good for killing tanky bosses. It's also good for bosses with downtime, like Sodetseg Mazes or Duke. Mixed Hide. This is ranged melee hybrid armor with low requirements and cost. It has stab and strength bonus. It is equal to Bando's roughly when paired with a Fang. It's slightly worse than Black D Hide when used with ranged gear. Can save inventory slots. It's bad for tanking anything like God Wars Dungeon. Blow Pipe. This is high DPS and a fast attacking weapon. It is very bad on tanky targets over 150 defense, and it's the best DPS on low defense targets, everything drained in Tob and Slayer. Offhands. The only useful offhands are DPS boosting ones. Shields are not useful outside of rare tanking situations, like Inferno, or rare useful boss interactions, like the Spectral Shield at Serb. The BIS for any melee activity is a Defender. The BIS for any ranged activity is a Buckler. And the BIS for any mage activity is the Ward, where a Book of the Dead is actually a good inventory saving offhand. The boss dying faster means it hits you less. Often camping an Ellie will make you take more damage overall than just camping a defender. Arceus Spellbook, this is not gear, but it's a similar choice to gear. Thralls add a flat 0.625 DPS at any location. This is more DPS than most gear editions. That DPS number sounds small, but it is typically 5 to 10% of your total DPS. You use a small amount of prayer points to summon these thralls, and you waste an inventory slot on the Book of the Dead. Even with all of these downsides, you use less overall resources using thralls than using something like Blood Barrage at almost every location. Boots. Boots are typically not worth using as switches as they are tiny boosts to DPS. Melee boots are far greater than the other styles, as they give a lot of strength bonus, and that is an important stat. Pegasian boots typically are almost completely useless everywhere, and they're not worth purchasing until you have nearly everything else in the game. These never see use in raids. Rings. For the most part, Lightbearer is the king of the slot. Melee rings are excellent for things that need it, which is all non-fang melee weapons. And Magus/Venator are typically similar to Lightbearer for DPS. They are rarely worth it as a switch, and lower tier versions of these rings are completely, utterly useless. Void. So Melee and Mage Void have far lower max hits than the alternatives and are nearly useless. Void Ranged, however, gives a large damage boost, and it is powerful when not on task. Void Ranged is terrible accuracy. It's only good on literally 0 defense. Sang and Trident. Sang is 1 max hit over Trident usually. It heals for 1/6 of the damage dealt. It is an amazing tool for getting into raids for the sustain. It's expensive. It's worth getting a bit later than some other upgrades. The Shadow, the ultra powerful magic weapon. This triples accuracy and damage bonuses on gear, and within Toa, this is quadruple. The base max hit increases with magic level boosts, which is Overload and Salt boosting it further. It's extremely weak without powerful magic gear equipped, and it punches through magic defense. It's decent in some unconventional places like Zabak. The Scythe, the ultra-powerful melee weapon. This rolls 3 times against larger targets with descending damage hit splats. This weapon benefits from strength bonus more than most melee weapons. It's better on lower defense targets, as it rolls accuracy 3 times. It has weird damage breakpoints, where certain max hits give bonus hits. It's less used than the other super weapons, as its use case is less broad. The T-Bow, the ultra-powerful ranged weapon. Its max hit and accuracy increases as opponent magic level increases, and the cap for it is higher in Calcs. It's useless on things with low magic level. It has weird damage breakpoints, where certain max hits give bonus hits, and it's better on targets with lower defense, but is capable of punching through a decent amount of defense. Bofa, the powerful mid-game range set, is useless without Crystal Armor. It boosts accuracy and max hit per piece. This punches through defense quite well, and it is very long range, which can be more useful over a pipe in some situations. ZCB, this is a powerful crossbow that makes ruby bolts hit for 110. It's typically the most powerful spec weapon for DPS, assuming the target has 500 HP or more. It's useful as a main hand weapon if the target is extremely tanky with lots of HP, like at Nex, and it's usually similar DPS to Bofa if paired with Nasori. The Venator Bow, this is the best DPS in game for multi-target. It's good against multiple small but very healthy targets like Slayer. It beats other options by around 50%, which is massive. It's useless on single target. The Saturated Heart boosts magic by 13 levels and doesn't decay. This is not useful in places with boosts already, things like Salts and Overload. You can pre-pot with Forgotten Brew to similar effect where you need it. It's only useful for mage camp bosses like Whisperer, and it's typically only worth buying late into an account. Ancestral Abyss Mage Robes is extremely overinflated in value due to benefit with Shadow. It's not even close to worth the money without a Shadow. It's 1 max over Virtus for the entire set and 2 over Arims for the entire set. Buying this before Shadow is simply trolling. The Accursed Scepter, the wilderness weapon with magic level draining special attack. It only works for 1 spec from 1 person. It's typically useless in PVM, including Toa. The BGS, very accurate defense draining slash special attack, drains exactly the amount of levels that it hits. It's great for when boss is currently at a lower defense level of around 100. It's great for when a small amount of levels need to be drained, like in Toa, and it's fairly useless when a target has a ton of defense compared to other options. The Elder Maul, this is a crush spec that drains 35% of target's current defense. It is directly better than Warhammer except for its max hit. It's amazing when target is very high defense, over 100. It's useless when the target is low defense, under 100, and it's less effective per special attack landed. The Toenails of Ralos, they drain a flat amount of defense levels based on magic level of target. It's useless nearly everywhere compared to other options. It's a solid option for Maiden and your best option for draining her, and its high price is kind of baffling. Claws, they're an extremely accurate slash special attack. They're great if the target is weak to slash or low defense, and these do lower damage the higher the opponent's defense is. Voidwaker is a guaranteed accurate special attack, lower max hit than Claws. These are amazing on extremely tanky targets like Kefri. They are worse than other options like ZCP or Claws on low defense. It does similar damage to Whip as a main hand weapon, which is useful in some cases. Chally is an extremely slow but powerful hitting special attack weapon. It's great for when a boss is about to have downtime, bloat, or grotesque guardians. It is terrible as a generic DPS spec. Even DDS is superior. Lastly, just touching some base on rebuilds, since nowadays is a little different than before Toa released. Rebuilds were something you did when Tebow was the only used mega rare and BIS everywhere, and you'd sell your whole bank and rebuild with the big shiny stick. Yeah, you don't do this anymore. There is too much variety in content with different BIS equipment and nuance that you will lose more money than you gain and burn yourself out. If you thought grinding next for a month was awful, then you aren't going to want to be locked at Toa 300s for 6 months just to get your gear back after dumping your bank for a shadow. There is a new website called Gearscape.net. You can easily plug in all of your gear and compare DPS with certain items to see what would be the best upgrade for you and the bosses you are trying to fight. If you have no clue, you can have the website suggest what to bring based on best DPS, but also set limits on the GP. If you have 500 mil, you can limit the gear it chooses from and best optimize within that budget. This tool is how I did all of my wiki guide videos and is infinitely more useful than any wiki setup. This tool is beyond powerful and they are constantly updating it. This will be your best friend, bookmark for when you start PVMing in OSRS. The most dynamic tool in Gearscape is Best Setup. So this gives you an optimal setup for literally any boss based on an amount of GP you currently have, items you own as an Iron Man, which can actually be imported, or an amount of risk when entering the wilderness. So I'm going to go over this in depth. Yes, it does have 4,000 different buttons, knobs, and switches, but I promise it's very simple to use once you get the hang of it, and even I use this for everyday content. So the top left has all of your in-game stats. These can be imported by inputting your in-game name with the Wise Old Man plugin in RuneLite. A bada bing, bada boom. Mining level is used for damage on guardians, and that last HP icon down here is for HP while derrocking. And below this is all the more random effects from items around the game. Are you on task? Are you in the wilderness? You have the hard sears done, are using sunfire runes, etc., etc. You can also toggle off entire styles from being used, like crush or ranged. If something seems off with your setup, you probably want to look here for something you have toggled incorrectly. So the next block is boss input. What boss are you fighting and what variant? If it's a raid boss, let's type in Kefri here. It might have some team size or difficulty modifiers, which you can change. This also includes all of the boss's stats, weaknesses, and tags, including what type of enemy it is. Here, Kefri is a Toa boss, so Shadow and Fang are multiplied against it, and it is a Cal fight, so Kiris is also boosted. You can also input a custom monster with whatever stats you'd like, good for testing future content or any odd calc you might be making. Below this is any weakening modifiers you're using against the boss. Things like defense draining special attacks or casting vulnerability. These will change the setup the tool chooses, as it may make certain styles better or worse. Maybe in this case, I wanted to do 20 BGS damage against Kefri for optimized damage. Here we have what is probably the most important tab, exclude and include. Exclude tells the tool things you don't have or aren't going to use. I tell the tool to exclude any untradeable items I don't have. Good examples are infernal capes or quivers, and they'll appear right up here. It's also good to tell it to exclude Zamarakian brews from use, as these can boost your attack level slightly higher, but nobody really uses these. You can also exclude prayers you don't have unlocked, like rigor or augury, and you could just add those in here if you don't have them. Include, on the other hand, is going to be for you Iron Men out there for the most part. Adding items here tells the tool that you own that item and it can be used in a setup. So add 2-mech and Shadow. I've told the tool, hey, I own a 2-mech and Shadow. If you're a main, you want this toggled to mark free, as it is here, so that the tool assumes you just own this and aren't reselling. If you're an Iron, you want this toggled to only include, as you won't be using GP to buy any items, and these are what you have. Your entire bank can be imported using the bank memory plugin in RuneLite. You would save your bank using bank memory plugin, right-click it in the plugin, copy it, and then hit import in here. So that's what I've done with my own bank, and everything I own is now in here. Meaning, if you're an Iron Man, you can import your bank, and the tool can still tell you what you should use based on that. You can also simply import a bank tag tab if you want only specific items. I'm just going to trash my items so I don't own anything. Below is our GP and content modifier. If you are a main, this is tremendously useful. You input an amount of GP and the setup tells you the best you can do for that amount. So let's say I have 200 mil for Kefri, we'll go off that. Gearscape decides what is best based on maximizing DPS by default. So it will try to maximize attack bonus with extra slots when it can't get you a max hit. You can also adjust this for the wilderness. The left is the amount amount of expensive items that you're willing to risk, and the right is a value you consider expensive. By default for wildy stuff, you typically will set this to 4 expensive items and input some amount you're willing to risk per item on the right side. If it's set to 11, which is every gear slot, it is assuming risk is not a worry and you aren't in the wilderness. Finally, after all this, when you hit a fine setup, the calc will run and output your optimized setup. It will tell you your DPS, max hit in said setup, accuracy, average hit, total cost of your setup, and allow you to create a name and import that setup back into RuneLite. And I know this looks like a very weird setup, but I am telling you, for the money that I have input, this is the absolute best possible option for Kefri. You can also import said created setup into the DPS calculator to mess with it if you want to see some other items. So if I type this Kefri calc, and I hit save here, ba-boom, it's saved, so I can go mess with that in the calculator on the other page. It even tells you your style, prayer, and potion it is assuming. So we're on lunge, we're using piety, and we're using a super combat. There's some cases where you don't simply want max DPS for the slot. Good examples are Lightbearer or Blood Fury. So I know that I'm going to be using a Lightbearer inside of Toa, so we're actually going to clear the slot. There's not a model for that, so we're just locking it as no ring. And then let's say I want to use a Blood Fury. We're going to go in, type in maybe a little Blood Fury, and lock that. To lock these in, you right-click the slot, hit lock, search for the item you want there instead. You can also right-click exclude these items. If I don't have a fire cape, I can exclude it, but I do. We're good. And then we just bring it over, rerun, and it'll have these slots locked with those items, and it'll now input an Infernal Cape, and it'll make some changes based on the strength bonus. In this case, it sees Mixed Tide is slightly better DPS. This tool has limitations. The biggest thing is raids. All this tool does is tell you the best possible setup at a boss, but it cannot determine what switches to use for multiple bosses for maximum DPS. Maybe deep into the future, they'll add something like this, but for now, we're on our own for full raid setups. For raids, we will need a calculator and some thought. Okay, talking about DPS calculators. So before we get into this, I want to lay out ground rules for raids. These are very complicated, and there's tons of nuance based on scale, difficulty, etc. So if you're looking to get into raiding, jumping into a calculator and calculating every single style and boss is going to be overwhelming and not helpful. I'd highly recommend checking out my or someone else's raid guides and figuring out a base setup, or using the best setup to figure out what you should use. A calculator is used to tweak setups once you have some base knowledge, not create from the ground up. The people who have done thousands of raids are usually a good place to start for getting that knowledge. OSRS has been around a long time, and there's content that has been fleshed out and solved already. So you don't have to overcomplicate learner setups. The metas are solid. Don't be afraid to look up a guide on a boss that you don't know. So before we get into anything with this, I want to talk about the lock at the top right. This is really useful for modifying the entire calculator. So you can duplicate a setup or delete it at will. You can have as many calculators going on here as you want, compared against each other if you wanted to, but for now we'll just keep it to 2. Also, you can move these around at will. I don't know why you would, but you can if you wanted to. A thing I was just taught, which I didn't know, is that you can actually move these sliders over here. And what's lovely about this is that this now applies all of these modifiers to both of the calcs. So you don't need to go changing this for both calcs for every single little thing you do. Really, really nice. Also, this one I think can go, and it can. There we go. We just got our best setup. I'm gonna just import that. So you can hit load setup because I saved it on the other side. Boom, pull it up. So why don't we use this tool to calc Mixed Tide versus Bandos, okay? So Gearscape calculator is intuitive. It's the best calculator we have. It's even better than the wiki. We're inputting the same things that we just did on the best setup section. It's your current gear, what attack style you're using, and if you're speccing or not, you just click this guy, your current stats, your current prayers, your current boosts, which is something I always forget. Let's actually just put these back to normal potions. There we go. It's all very UI friendly. The spell that you're using, if you're casting, we're not in this case. And then any defense modifiers. So for now, we'll just assume that Kefri's being BGS'd at 20. And then any other weird modifiers right here at the end. Thrall, DPS, Candor, and Hard Diary. You got it. Same as the other page. Exact same. Okay, so I have my base set up. I'm going to just delete that other one I had and duplicate this in. I want to see Bandos versus Mixed Tide. So let's just enter Bandos in here. We're assuming a Lightbearer is in here for a typical Toa raid, so let's just see the comparison. Okay, so we have our monster in here, Kefri, typical 500 raid level, and we can see that in this case, when she is BGS'd, it is actually slightly better in Bandos than using Mixed Tide. We have 0.93% difference. I can actually go ahead and mess with that. What happens if you don't BGS Kefri? Then it's pretty much equal. Mixed side is just barely worse, 0.14% worse. So this is like the general thing that you're looking at. You have a full printout of everything. We have the DPS for both setups, overkill, max hit, accuracy, the average hit, and the time to kill. So these are all spat out here at you. There's another useful thing as well, which is monster DPS. This tells you, and it's not useful for Kefri, but in some cases where you're tanking monsters, it'll tell you the DPS of the monster against you in whatever tank armor you're wearing. Might be useful at a place like Nex or God Wars Dungeon where you want to see how hard those minions are going to be hitting you. You can actually just go check and it'll tell you their DPS against you. And you can check different tank setups or different things like that. So this is really, really useful for that kind of thing. Really important thing that was added recently is the share preset button. So you're having some discourse with your buddies in Discord and you're talking about how good mixed tide is versus bandos and you want to have a chat about it. Boom, you can hit the share button and it actually generates a link. And this will give this exact layout to somebody else that they can mess with. Somebody goes, no, you're talking a bunch of bunk. You just give them the link. You're like, here it is. And then they can mess with it. So perfect for that kind of thing. Basically, this tool gives you every little resource you could possibly need in order to calc anything you can possibly think of. Special attacks in different cases, different bosses, different defense, spec drains, everything you could possibly think of. So it's amazing for tweaking little numbers, not so amazing for generating a full setup, but luckily they have a tool for that as well. Final note, if you ever find a bug within Gearscape, their Discord is super friendly and helpful. The button for that is just right here on their website. So every time I've had an issue, they almost immediately fix it. They do care a lot about the quality of the website and helping the community. So don't be afraid to report a bug if you do see something. They're actually currently working on open sourcing and integrating more with RuneLite. So I'm expecting a lot of really cool features soon. Learning raids can be daunting. Even after you are sure you have all your gear set up, the GP in the bank, stats properly leveled, learning will take time. A lot of people ask me how I got so good at the game, how long I've played, etc. Would you believe I wasn't actually born this way? There's plenty of old footage of me with a whip and Sir Palmentab dying to a soap maze or failing tightrope skips. I used to get made fun of on stream relentlessly for not knowing how to do crabs in Calcs properly. If you want to learn, take the time to learn. There are many guides out there, mine included, that are dedicated to helping people learn all kinds of content from any skill level. Some things just take practice. A huge one people ask is how to do Red X Baba or Butterfly Akka. You just go into a 0 invo raid and don't come out until you've mastered it. There's no cost here but time. If you get frustrated or don't understand why you've died or it's not clicking for you, don't be afraid to record yourself and review your mistakes or ask others to look at it. You can take the time to learn something with enough practice, or you can be those people who have played for 15 years and haven't stepped foot into a raid. People massively underestimate themselves and the OSRS community when it comes to what they are capable of. Do not sell yourself short. I have lost millions of GP on deaths and supplies. Look at how many purple sweets I used per speedrun. I guarantee I have died more times than you, the person watching. Dying is valuable in teaching you something for the next attempt. The reason raids are so lucrative is because of this complexity and difficulty. When I wipe, I don't hit the thumbs down and log out. I say, damn, and I re-gear and I jump back in. Many people die and give up. If you keep going, there's plenty of GP to be earned. You don't need a specific amount of experience with different content to do raids. Killing your 500th Dagonoth King won't prepare you for solo Chambers of Xeric. The only way to learn content is by doing that content and failing until it clicks. If you ever have questions, my Discord is always open. There's a lot of experienced players in there that can give input. And that's it for the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to support the channel, think about joining the members here on YouTube or subscribe on Twitch. We have just recently launched a new merch store. I'm actually a huge fan of all these designs. Hedron, my editor, is also a very, very talented artist, and she's constantly adding new designs to the store. The quality is really, really solid, and I'm a very big fan. The mouse pad, which I'm an owner of, and this shirt. So if you want some, check it out. It's in the link in the description below. And again, big thanks to HelloFresh for sponsoring this video. Leave a like if you liked it, and or subscribe. Thanks, guys.